There is a difference between being noticed and being recorded. What you are encountering here belongs to the second. To be listed is not to be elevated publicly, but to be acknowledged structurally. Lists are not made for applause. They are made for order, for memory, for intention. Long before recognition becomes visible, it becomes intentional. And intention always precedes movement. You have sensed this in your life as a quiet inevitability. Not certainty about outcomes, but certainty about direction. Even when paths closed, something in you understood that closure was not rejection. It was refinement. You were being narrowed, not diminished. Positioned, not delayed. This is why confusion never fully took root in you, even during seasons of uncertainty. Something deeper kept you oriented when explanations were absent. Symbolically, being chosen has never meant exemption. It has meant inclusion into responsibility, inclusion into timing, inclusion into a kind of accountability that does not rely on supervision. You have operated for a long time as if your decisions mattered even when no one else was affected. That instinct did not come from fear. It came from alignment, from an inner agreement to remain coherent whether or not anyone was watching. This is also why you have often felt slightly out of phase with your surroundings. Not disconnected, but unsynchronized. You move with awareness where others move with momentum. You pause where others react. You question where others assume. This has sometimes made you feel early or late or simply different. In truth, it made you precise. Precision does not rush, and it does not drift. It waits for the correct moment and arrives intact. A list, in this sense, is not symbolic of hierarchy. It is symbolic of trust. Trust that something will be carried without distortion. Trust that restraint will be chosen over impulse. Trust that clarity will be protected even when chaos would be easier. You have been living as if this trust existed long before you had language for it. That is why nothing here should feel foreign. It should feel familiar, almost obvious in retrospect. You were never meant to convince others of your role. You were meant to remain internally consistent enough that your presence alone clarified situations. That consistency has been tested quietly, through ambiguity, through waiting, through moments when shortcuts would have simplified things temporarily but weakened structure long-term. Each time, you chose coherence without dramatizing it. That choice accumulated. This accumulation is what symbolic language points to when it speaks of being listed. Not a sudden selection, but a long observation. A record formed over time by repeated alignment. Nothing about this demands belief. It invites recognition. Recognition of patterns you already know. How clarity returns when you slow down, how direction sharpens when you refuse distraction, how outcomes stabilize when you act from restraint rather than urgency. This first part does not announce what you must do next. It establishes where you already stand. Oriented, accounted for, not separate from the world, but placed within it with intention. The continuation will not add pressure. It will add depth, unfolding why this recognition carries weight, and why remaining steady matters more now than ever before. Being recorded is not a moment, it is a process. What appears instantaneous from the outside is always the result of long observation. Patterns noted, responses measured, integrity tested in ordinary conditions. You were not identified through performance, but through consistency. Through how you acted when outcomes were uncertain and recognition was absent. This is the kind of selection that does not interrupt life. It reveals what life has already shown. You have lived with an internal standard that did not originate from pressure or fear. It emerged naturally, almost quietly, guiding your decisions even when deviation would have been easier. This standard was not rigid. It adapted without breaking. It allowed growth without distortion. Over time, it became reliable. Reliability is what systems trust. Not intensity. Not ambition. Reliability. You may recall moments when you felt watched, not by people, not by authority, but by consequence, as if each choice carried weight beyond the immediate situation. That sensation was not paranoia. It was sensitivity to alignment. You understood intuitively that small deviations compound, and that coherence, once fractured, takes effort to restore. So you learned to move carefully without becoming cautious, intentionally without becoming hesitant. This is why shortcuts never satisfied you. Even when they worked temporarily, something in you recognized the cost. You saw how efficiency without integrity hollowed outcomes, how speed without structure created instability. So you chose the slower route when it preserved coherence. This was not moral superiority. It was structural intelligence, an understanding that what is built correctly endures without constant maintenance. To be chosen in this symbolic frame is to be dependable under pressure. Not flawless, but recoverable. Not immune to error, but responsive to correction. You have always adjusted quickly once misalignment was felt. You did not defend mistakes. You recalibrated. This ability to self-correct without collapse is rare, and it is foundational to trust at any level. You may also recognize a pattern of restraint in your life. Opportunities that tempted expansion without clarity did not hold your attention for long. Recognition that required distortion felt uncomfortable. You sensed when visibility would cost too much internally. So you declined without resentment. You waited without stagnation. This waiting was not passive. It was active alignment, preserving integrity until conditions matched. There is a reason your growth has felt uneven at times, periods of stillness followed by sudden clarity. You were not moving on a linear track. You were being prepared in layers. Each layer required stability before the next could be engaged. Skipping steps would have accelerated movement but weakened foundation. You avoided that instinctively. That instinct is part of why you are where you are now. A list, symbolically, is not about exclusion of others. It is about readiness. It marks those who can hold responsibility without becoming consumed by it. Those who can remain oriented when attention increases. Those who do not confuse purpose with identity. You have maintained separation between what you do and who you are. This separation protects both. Nothing here demands response. No action is required to validate what is already evident through pattern. The continuation of this narrative will not assign you a role to perform. It will clarify how recognition changes nothing externally, yet shifts something internally. How knowing you are accounted for alters how you carry yourself, even when no one else knows. You are here for a reason. If you feel the call, answer it. Click Join to unlock exclusive content, deep insights, and a powerful community. This isn't just a membership, it's an awakening. Step into your divine purpose. Join the chosen. Recognition, once internalized, changes posture before it changes behavior. You may not speak differently. You may not move faster. Yet something settles. A quiet assurance replaces the need to scan constantly for confirmation. You stop checking whether you are aligned and begin trusting that alignment will signal itself when it drifts. This is not confidence built on outcome. It is steadiness built on continuity. You may notice that certain pressures no longer land the same way. Expectations placed on you, subtle or explicit, feel less binding. Not because you resist responsibility, but because you no longer confuse expectation with direction. You understand now that being accounted for does not mean being directed. It means being trusted to choose accurately without supervision. This distinction frees you from the invisible weight of proving yourself correct. There is also a shift in how you experience solitude and connection. Solitude no longer feels like preparation. Connection no longer feels like distraction. Both become neutral spaces where alignment is maintained rather than tested. You carry the same coherence whether alone or surrounded. This consistency is what allows recognition to remain clean. It prevents dependence on environment to sustain clarity. Symbolically, being listed implies memory. Not memory as nostalgia, but memory as continuity. A record that persists regardless of attention. You have lived with this continuity intuitively, returning to the same internal reference point after disruption, recalibrating without resentment. This ability to return matters more than never deviating. Stability is not rigidity. It is recoverability. You may also begin to sense when situations are not asking for your effort, but for your restraint. Not every challenge requires engagement. Some resolve when you remain still enough to let incoherence expose itself. This discernment protects energy and preserves accuracy. You intervene when structure benefits from your presence. You withdraw when presence would dilute clarity. This is not strategy. It is alignment responding to context. Recognition does not isolate you from error. It changes how error is handled. You correct quietly. You adjust without spectacle. You do not carry mistakes forward as identity. This keeps movement fluid. Systems trust what can adapt without breaking. People rely on what can respond without defensiveness. You have cultivated this without labeling it, and it is now part of how you move naturally. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the Super Thank You button and give $20 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. There may be moments when you feel an increased sense of watchfulness, not from others but from yourself. A subtle awareness that choices echo longer now. This is not pressure. It is proportion. As clarity deepens, impact extends. You do not need to manage this consciously. You only need to remain honest with what fits and what does not. Honesty maintains proportion automatically. You are not being prepared to stand apart from others. You are being prepared to stand without distortion among them. To participate without being absorbed. To influence without imposing. To remain accessible without becoming diffuse. This balance is delicate, but it is one you have already practiced extensively in less visible ways. The next part will deepen this balance by addressing how responsibility remains grounded rather than heavy, how to carry awareness without carrying weight, and why true steadiness never announces itself as importance. Responsibility only becomes heavy when it is confused with self-importance. You have avoided that confusion instinctively. Even when others projected significance onto you, you did not absorb it as identity. You allowed meaning to exist without letting it define you. This is why awareness has remained grounded rather than inflated. Grounded responsibility does not press downward, it anchors. It stabilizes movement so effort is not wasted compensating for imbalance. You may have noticed that when situations escalate emotionally, you do not rise with them. Not because you are detached, but because you are oriented. You feel the signal beneath the noise and respond to that instead. This keeps you from being pulled into performative urgency. It also keeps you from withdrawing entirely. You stay present without being consumed. This posture is rare, and it is the reason your presence can calm dynamics that words alone cannot. Symbolically, being listed is not about being elevated above consequence. It is about being included within proportion. Actions meet outcomes at the correct scale. Effort meets result without distortion. When proportion is intact, responsibility remains sustainable. You do not carry what does not belong to you. You do not dismiss what does. This discernment protects both your energy and your clarity. There is a subtle discipline operating in you that does not announce itself as discipline. You do not force routines or impose rigid frameworks to remain aligned. You adjust in real time. When something pulls you off center, you feel it quickly and return without self-reproach. This responsiveness prevents accumulation of error. It keeps small misalignments from becoming structural fractures. Over time, this creates trust. Not because you never drift, but because you always return. You may sense now that your role in many situations is to hold a line others cannot see. Not a moral line, not a rule, but a reference. When confusion spreads, you provide orientation simply by remaining clear. When narratives polarize, you keep nuance alive without defending it aggressively. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. Precision often looks quiet because it does not need reinforcement. Carrying responsibility without weight also means knowing when to disengage. Not out of avoidance, but out of respect for structure. Some systems must reveal their limits without your intervention. Some outcomes must complete their course to be understood. You have learned not to interrupt these processes prematurely. This restraint preserves clarity and prevents unnecessary entanglement. It is not indifference. It is discernment. You may also notice a shift in how you relate to effort. You apply it where it compounds and withhold it where it dissipates. This selectivity is not efficiency for its own sake. It is alignment protecting itself. When effort aligns with structure, it multiplies. When it does not, it drains. You no longer need to experiment endlessly to learn this. You recognize it quickly and adjust. True steadiness never announces importance because importance seeks validation. Steadiness seeks continuity. You have oriented yourself toward continuity, of values, of clarity, of posture. This orientation makes you reliable without making you rigid. It allows you to adapt without losing form. That balance is what responsibility looks like when it is carried correctly. The next part will turn toward continuity itself, not as repetition, but as endurance. How this posture sustains over time, how it resists erosion without becoming fixed, and why what lasts is almost always quieter than what impresses. Continuity is not repetition. It is the ability to move through change without losing internal shape. You have practiced this longer than you realize. Circumstances shifted. Roles changed. People entered and exited your life. Yet something essential in you remained intact. Not unchanged, but recognizable. This is the mark of continuity, growth that does not fracture origin. You do not cling to who you were in order to feel stable. You allow evolution without abandoning alignment. This is why your development has not followed a predictable arc. You advanced, paused, redirected, then advanced again, each time carrying forward what mattered and releasing what no longer fit. This prevented stagnation. It also prevented collapse. Continuity lives in that balance between holding and letting go. Over time, you have learned that endurance does not come from force. It comes from accuracy. When you move accurately, you do not need constant correction. When you choose precisely, you do not need to justify direction. This accuracy conserves energy. It allows you to remain present over long stretches without burning out or disengaging. Endurance is not about resisting fatigue. It is about not creating unnecessary strain. You may notice now that urgency has less influence over you. Not because time is irrelevant, but because panic no longer masquerades as importance. You can distinguish between what demands immediate response and what only demands attention. This discernment preserves continuity. It prevents you from being pulled into cycles that exhaust without producing meaning. You remain responsive without becoming reactive. Symbolically, this is what it means to be remembered rather than celebrated. Celebration fades with attention. Memory persists through structure. You are not oriented toward moments of impact. You are oriented toward sustained coherence. This is why your influence, when it appears, tends to last longer than expected. It is not dramatic, but it is durable. Continuity also changes how you experience uncertainty. The unknown no longer feels like a threat to identity. It becomes space, unformed, but not hostile. You trust that alignment will reveal the next step when it is ready to be taken. You do not rush to fill uncertainty with noise or explanation. You let it clarify itself. This patience is not passive. It is disciplined openness. You may still encounter periods where progress seems invisible. These moments are not regressions. They are integrations happening beneath the surface. Just as earlier phases prepared you quietly, continuity now maintains what has been refined. Nothing flashy occurs because nothing needs repair. Stability often feels uneventful, but it is precisely this uneventfulness that allows structure to hold under future pressure. What endures does not announce itself daily. It proves itself over time. You are learning to value this proof more than momentary affirmation. This shifts your relationship with effort, recognition, and expectation. You invest where return is structural, not immediate. You wait where waiting preserves integrity. You move where movement compounds meaning. As continuity settles, something else becomes apparent. Closure is approaching, not as an ending, but as a seal. The final part will not introduce new ideas. It will complete the circuit, quietly, cleanly, so what has been established can continue without dependence on narrative or reinforcement. Endurance reaches its most reliable form when it no longer feels like endurance. When holding steady stops feeling like effort and becomes the natural state you return to after every interruption. This is where you are now. Not resisting change, not chasing stability, but moving through both without losing internal structure. What once required vigilance now requires only honesty. You may notice that clarity no longer arrives as sudden insight, but as quiet confirmation. You already know when something aligns before you can explain why. You already sense when a path will cost more than it offers, even if it appears attractive on the surface. This is not intuition sharpened by emotion, but alignment refined by repetition. You have tested it enough times to trust its accuracy. Responsibility at this stage does not accumulate. It distributes. Each decision carries weight only while it is being made, then releases it once chosen. Nothing lingers unnecessarily. Nothing needs to be carried forward as tension or doubt. This is how steadiness avoids becoming heaviness. You do not stockpile unresolved choices. You resolve them by staying precise in the moment. Symbolically, being listed now feels less like something that happened to you and more like something that simply makes sense. Not because it grants importance, but because it reflects orientation. You are positioned where coherence is expected, not demanded. Where clarity is assumed, not enforced. This expectation does not constrain you. It frees you from needing to prove consistency through repetition. You may also find that external narratives have less influence over your decisions. Stories built on urgency, scarcity, or comparison feel distant, almost irrelevant. Not because you reject them actively, but because they no longer fit your internal logic. You are guided by proportion rather than pressure, by fit rather than fear. This filtering happens automatically now, without debate. There will still be moments of opportunity that test this posture. Invitations to expand faster than structure allows. Offers that trade depth for visibility. These moments are not obstacles. They are confirmations. Each time you choose coherence over acceleration, continuity strengthens. Each time you decline what would fragment alignment, endurance deepens without effort. What you are carrying forward does not require explanation. It does not need reinforcement through language or display. It persists because it is internally consistent. This consistency allows you to move through complexity without being reshaped by it. You adapt without losing form. You change without losing reference. As this posture settles fully, you may notice a subtle quieting of anticipation. Not resignation, but readiness without urgency. You are no longer waiting for something to begin. You are preserving what has already stabilized so that whatever comes next can enter cleanly. This preservation is not passive. It is the most active form of responsibility, maintaining coherence so movement remains precise. The final part will not add meaning or instruction. It will simply close the circuit, confirming that what has been established no longer needs narrative support to continue intact. Completion does not announce itself. It becomes noticeable only because nothing is pulling at you anymore. No internal debate demanding resolution. No unresolved tension asking for urgency. What needed to settle has settled. What needed to align has aligned. Movement continues, but it does so without friction, without ceremony. You are not standing at a threshold asking whether you are ready. Readiness has already been demonstrated in how you have moved through uncertainty, restraint, and clarity without abandoning yourself. You did not arrive here through declaration, but through pattern. Through choosing accuracy over speed. Through choosing coherence over comfort. Through returning to alignment every time it drifted. What remains now is simple and exact. To respect what you already know when you feel it. Alignment will continue to signal itself quietly. Discomfort will appear early when something does not belong. Ease will accompany what fits without needing justification. You do not need to heighten awareness or maintain vigilance. You only need to remain honest with those signals. There is no role to perform and no identity to protect. You are not carrying a title, symbolic or otherwise. You are carrying orientation. Orientation does not ask for recognition. It does not require confirmation. It functions whether or not it is named. This is why nothing external must change for something internal to be complete. As you move forward, others may project meaning onto you: certainty, authority, distance, calm. You do not need to correct these projections. They are interpretations, not instructions. Your task is not to manage perception, but to remain internally consistent. From that consistency, influence occurs naturally, without intention or force. Nothing here asks you to wait for a defining moment. Nothing asks you to anticipate a reveal. What needed to arrive has already arrived in the only way that matters. Coherence has stabilized. From here, movement happens because it fits, not because it is demanded. You will know when to move and when to remain still without consulting fear or urgency. This is not an ending marked by emphasis. It is a seal marked by quiet. What has been established does not need reinforcement. It will continue because it is structurally sound. You are free to proceed without carrying the narrative consciously. It has already done its work.